Hey guys, how you doing? Welcome to the video. Welcome to my garage. In this video, we're going to be taking this 3.5 liter J-Series Honda motor and we're going to be mocking it up into the Wratchet chassis. I've been hunting for engines lately for Wratchet. I know I was originally just going to use the same Ecotech or just an Ecotech like I do in Mahler there, but I've decided since Wratchet is actually a larger, heavier Baja, I think I decided I want something with a little bit more grunt, and I still don't want to just jump right up to an LS because I think there's a lot of horsepower available nowadays with fuel injection in the 4-cylinder and 6-cylinder engines. So I did some research, and what I found is prevalent by me are these J-Series Honda engines. And so I went to the junkyard and I picked one up. This is the one that I have. It's out of a 2002 Acura MDX, and from the Carfax report, this has probably around 165,000 miles on it, and the vehicle that I took it out of was in a rollover crash. So basically that means if you take an engine out of a vehicle that was in a collision, the engine itself should run just fine because you know that the person was driving down the road without any problems when they got into an accident. Not that that's a guarantee that this is a perfect little motor, but that's basically the rule of thumb I use when I'm hunting the junkyards trying to find a motor. So what we're going to do in this video is we're hopefully going to get the engine mounted back here. Now, to complicate things a little bit more, I'm about 80% sure this is the engine I'm going to run. I have not fully looked into what sort of fuel injection options I have for this yet, so I'm not 100% sure I'm going to run this engine at this point. So because of that, I don't want to necessarily purchase the adapter plate yet to bolt this up to the transaxle until I'm 100% sure this is the engine I'm going to run. I do know at this point I'm most likely going to run a V6, so I'm comfortable installing this back there and building the cage around it because whatever V6 I end up going with is going to be roughly the same dimensions as this engine. But I do need to make myself a little cheater adapter plate so that I can bolt the engine back there and get an idea of how things will go. So what I'm going to do for this engine is I'm actually going to take a piece of, this is a piece of 3/4 inch masonite, and I've never actually done this before, so this is a little bit experimental. But so far what I've done is I've taken the mounting flange or the mounting surface for the rear of the Honda here, and I took a piece of ram board and I made a cutout, and then I put all the bolt holes and everything in it that I will need. So I can take this and I can take it over to this piece of masonite and I put it on there and I traced out all the bolt holes. And then what I'm left with is basically a template onto this masonite that has the bolt holes that I need for the engine. Now what I need to do is I also need to transfer bolt holes for the Wratchet transmission on here. And I have not done this one yet so that I can show you guys exactly how I do it. So I have a piece of ram board here, and I'm going to hold it up to the back of the transaxle here, and I'm actually going to take a mallet and just tap out all of these perimeter lines and the little center of the axle here so that it makes an indentation onto the ram board here, and then I'll be able to just trace that out, make sure it all lines up, and then I'll have a nice template of the Wratchet transaxle here. Okay, so now this is the template that I had for the engine. I've already transferred that onto the Masonite. This is the piece you just saw me make off the bell housing of the Weddell transaxle, which is the bus type 2, except for the starter location. And then after I did that, you saw me flipping it back and forth. That was me verifying that the two halves are symmetrical, so it's exactly the same on either side. Knowing that, then I folded this in half, making sure that the holes line up, and folding it in half gave me a good scribe mark right through the middle. And you can see I've already got a scribe mark on the Masonite here, so I can line these up really well if I just put this little break mark on my center scribe and then just kind of line it up with the X in the middle. Again, this doesn't need to be super duper accurate, but you want it to be as accurate as possible. And then I'm going to X those just so that I can remember that these are for the transaxle. These are for dowel pins in the back of the engine, so I'm going to drill those even larger than what they are there. That's why I put a circle with the slash. Doesn't really mean anything, but it just lets me know those are for the dowels. One thing I want to point out, as you guys were watching me do that, take note that I did that with a rubber mallet, not a hardened steel mallet. I wouldn't want to go wrapping on the engine or the transaxle with a hardened steel hammer. It would ding the aluminum, it would possibly ding any of the hardened steel components, so I did that all with a rubber mallet. Alright, so it's super hot in here right now. I've got the fan going in the background. I hope you guys can't hear that, but either way, I've got to have it running. It's really warm in here. I have the adapter now made up. I've got all the holes drilled in there, and for some reason I painted it. I kind of wish I wouldn't, because now I'm afraid that some of the paint is going to stick to the mating surfaces, but I painted it. So, and I also have all of my nuts and bolts to the right length, ready to go. And I've got the engine in place with my hoist hooked up to it, and Wratchet's transaxle is right there waiting for it. And I also took the adapter and I bolted it up to both surfaces, made sure that all the holes were good, made sure that the bolts for the other adapter worked back and forth, and luckily, just by dumb luck, everything seems to fit really well. None of the bolts interfere with the other mounting surface or anything like that, at least so far. So far everything's going really good. So let's hoist this thing up here, and I'm going to bolt the adapter to the Weddell transaxle first, so that because once the engine is on there, I won't be able to get to the bolt heads. So I'm going to bolt it onto the Weddell first, and then I'm going to hoist the Honda up to it, put it on there, and then hopefully all the bolts will go in there. There we have it, ladies and gentlemen. It actually worked quite well. You can see the temporary adapter plate in there. It's got all the bolts in there. Everything fit as it should, nothing really binded or anything. I do have the engine, it's just a piece of 3/4 inch masonite, so I'm obviously not going to have the engine just dangling off of there. It's really there just to hold it in place. And I do have this screw jack holding the engine up. Notice it's a screw jack, not a hydraulic jack. You'll notice, well, it's the only one on here right now, but you'll see these screw jacks underneath the chassis from time to time. I use these for mocking things up, holding them in place, because they never settle because they're not hydraulic. So anyways, I'm real happy with that. It worked really well. I'm a little bit of a cheap ass because I don't want to buy the adapter yet, but like I said, I want to make 100% sure this is the engine I'm going to go with before I spend the money on the flywheel and the adapter plate and all that. So this will hold this pretty much in position where I can mock up all the rear cage. I won't be doing motor mounts or anything like that because the adapter plate might not be the exact same thickness as that. So I'll just keep this mocked up until I get all of this structure going. But once I've decided that I am going to go with that engine, I'll order up the adapter probably from Kennedy Engineering, bolt that in place, and then I can actually start working on motor mounts. I tried really hard to not let this hang out so much. If you remember all of the discussions when I was setting the transaxle on the wheelbase, originally I was going to go 4.5 inches longer than Mahler. I ended up on 2 inches longer than Mahler so that I could tuck this in as tight as possible. So let me give you some of the specs here. This transaxle, the distance from the center of the axle to the end of the bell housing is 2.5 inches longer than the bus transaxle, just because it's a larger transaxle. So that immediately pushes me 2.5 inches out further. Then my wheelbase on Wratchet here is 2 inches longer than Mahler, so that pushes me another 2 inches. So now, no matter what, I'm 4.5 inches farther out than Mahler, which is fine. Now, if you measure the mating surface to basically the end of the harmonic balancer on this Honda J Series compared to the Ecotec motor, this engine is actually 1/2 inch shorter because it's a 6-cylinder V6, whereas Mahler is a 4-cylinder inline. So I gain a little bit of 1/2 inch there. However, because Mahler is meant to be a little bit more thrashed, I'm going to build the cage around this engine with more space. So whereas Mahler's cage is pretty tight here, this one's going to stick out a little bit more. So that'll cost me a couple more inches. But let's take some measurements between the two. If we go to the end of the roof line on Mahler to an imaginary line that would go straight down, I would say Mahler hangs back 17 inches to the very end of the engine cage. And if we try the same thing, I would say realistically, with when I build the cage, Wratchet will probably be at 22. So overall, that's only 5 inches longer than Mahler. And honestly, I think that's pretty good with a longer wheelbase, a longer transaxle, and allowing a little bit of extra room back here to only grow 5. I think that's pretty good. And this is going to look pretty natural back here. The valve covers are actually tucked a little bit underneath the skirt here. So it's not like it's completely hanging out here like a sore thumb. And by the time I actually build an intake manifold up here, it's going to take me almost up to the roof line. So, I think it's really going to look pretty good back there. So guys, that's it for this video. Nothing really major on this one, but it's pretty damn exciting to now come back here and have this engine where it's supposed to be, because now I can really start visualizing. I've told you guys in other videos, I can't really build stuff without having the bulk there so that I can see what I'm working with. I've still got to get some fiberglass panels back here so that I know what the tubing needs to work around, but having the engine back here will help me kind of wrap my head around how I'm going to set all this up, because I've got to figure out how I'm going to make the rear cage. And then since this is going to be H-arm rear suspension, I'm going to have shock absorbers coming in here just like I do on Mauler, and I need to figure out how I'm going to tie that in so that it's, number one, super duper strong, and number two, looks nice. Because remember, for me, that's got a lot to do with it. So either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video. I think it was kind of cool seeing how you can pretty easily and quickly make a temporary adapter to help you mock things up and kind of figure out if that's the engine you want, and to help you start figuring out the chassis before you have to actually purchase the adapter. So thanks for watching the video, guys. I hope it's helping you with whatever projects you might be working on, and I hope to see you on the next one. Take care.